This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
But Jesus takes that opportunity in verses 32 through 40, which is the second section, and he teaches them about what a real experience with Christ is really all about. And it's what he says, it's the difference between shallow faith, which is what we see in 25 through 31, and a deep faith, which is verses 32 through 40. So we're going to take a look at these two. And as we take a look at these two, I want you to judge yourself. What kind of faith do you have? Is it a shallow faith or a deep faith or somewhere in between? What kind of faith do you have? So first, let's look at the shallow faith. What is a shallow faith? And it's basically, there are three ways to look at it, and we see these in this passage of Scripture. And the first one is that a shallow faith defines faith by an agenda. There is an agenda to the faith. I have a purpose for believing this, or for holding on to this, or for trusting this, that this is going to do something for me. And so I have an agenda for my faith. Now, a lot of people are there, and you might say, well, isn't that really kind of normal? Isn't that what we're supposed to have? Well, let's take a look at what their faith was and see how that fits. Jesus really calls them out for their shallowness. It's a stern warning to be careful in your faith that you not seek after experiences. Now, you're going to have experiences. You're going to see God show up in your life, and you're going to see God show up in other people's life. You are going to have some of those experiences, but it's not about chasing after those experiences. Now, I know, and maybe you are one of these people, but if you are not, you know some people that are like this. They're always chasing after experiences. I just want to have another experience. I want to feel God. I want to feel the Spirit. I want to have this experience with God. And so they're chasing after these experiences instead of really seeking after God. It's more about knowing the experience than it is about knowing God. And I'm amazed when I've talked to some of these people how they know all about the experience, but they don't know about the God who brings the experience. Well, they know some things about Him. But their relationship is so shallow with God that when you talk to them, you realize it's a very small, it's like an infant relationship with God. And they're just I'm so totally dependent on God, but they don't really know Him. They know about Him. They've seen what He does, but they don't have this intimate, personal, ongoing, two-way relationship with Him where they know Him. And as Jesus said, my sheep know my voice and hear me and follow me. They don't know the voice of God. They don't have that intimate, personal relationship with God. They know about Him, but they know more about the experiences. They know more about what He does. They know more about what the results are of what God does in people's lives. And so they're just looking after these experiences and after gratification, even this personal gratification. And Jesus explained it this way in another teaching opportunity in Luke, in chapter 12, verse 34. He said, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Whatever it is that is important to you, that's what you will follow. That's what you will seek after. That will become the focus of your life. That will become the purpose, the goal of your life. What you seek after is what you treasure. What you treasure is what you seek after. If you seek after gold, what is your treasure? Gold. If you seek after a relationship, what is your treasure? A relationship. If you seek after God Himself, what is your treasure? God Himself. And there are way too many people who are seeking after what God does instead of an intimate, personal relationship with God Himself. What is your treasure? What is it that you seek after? What is the focus of your life? What is it that you're wanting out of a faith relationship? And God promises in Jeremiah 29:9 that if you will seek me, you will find me. When you seek me with all your heart. It's a wonderful promise from God. But it's what God says about a relationship. It's not about seeking what I can do for you, seeking not what I have in my hand, but seeking me. What I have, who I am, and a personal, intimate relationship with me. What is your treasure? What are you seeking out of life? A shallow faith seeks what God can do. A deep faith will seek God himself, just knowing God and having that personal, intimate relationship with him. The second characteristic of a shallow faith is that it defines faith by works. Now, in the Christian circles and in religious circles, we love tossing this word. Well, faith is not, works and grace, and we toss all of these words around, and we have this idea of works that it's like, show me your faith, I'll show you your works, show me your works, I'll show you your faith, so forth and so on. And we get into this religiosity talk, and we've defined works in a different way. But this is not the difference between grace and works. This is about misunderstanding what the faith lifestyle is. So kind of put that talk about works, when we talk about religious terminologies and definitions, put that on the back burner. Let's just take the word for what it is. Works, doing things. Far too many people believe that the busier they are for God, the more faithful they are. The busier they are for God, the more faithful they are. It's the old, I'd rather wear out than rust out for God syndrome. Ever hear anybody say that? My dad used to say that all the time. But now Dad had an intimate relationship with God. So it wasn't about being busy for God. And there are a lot of people that way. And by the way, one of the busiest person I know in this church is Mary Sinclair. I do not believe that Mary is busy. It's not the being busy for God, because she doesn't do it because she's working her way into heaven. She doesn't do it for that reason. She does it because she's just being faithful, and she believes that's what the Lord's doing in her life. And she has made decisions in her life, by the way. I remember one time when she was singing in, for those of you who come to pageant, there is a hidden choir called the pit choir. It's back behind, and it's on mic, so that when the choir on the stage is moving around, the choir behind is singing on mics, and so the balance stays the same. So there's this live choir behind and it's staged, and I have the privilege of working with that choir. And Mary sang in that choir, I don't know, a few years, I don't know how long. And one year she just decided that I'm too busy, I can't do this year. It's because she was busy doing stuff with the other things in the pageant. And so it was that turning that thing down because she knew she was too busy. So I'm not talking about that, doing things because you're obeying what the Lord wants to do in your life, and understanding there are certain things that you have to put beside you and other things that you can do or should do or have to do because the Lord tells you to do that. I'm not talking about the obedience issue. I'm talking about just being busy because the busier you are, you think you're a better Christian. It's like carrying a big Bible because you're a good Christian. It's that sort of thing. I'm a good Christian. Goes, look at the size of my Bible. It's kind of that attitude, It's like I have to prove how good a Christian I am because of how busy I am. That's what we're talking about. That's the principle here. Not that being busy is wrong, but because if that's where God's led you, great. But if your busyness is about a personal experience, how it makes you feel, then you've missed what it is that God really wants to do in your life. Jesus is quick to define the kind of work that God is looking for. It's in John chapter 6, verse 29. This is what Jesus said. This is the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. That's the work. That's what it is that God is looking for. He's not looking for all of the things you do. It's not like he's got a little report card up. Okay, swept the church floor. Nice job, Okay, took a cake over to the neighbor when the dog died. Nice job, It's not that sort of, it's not like God's keeping score. When you get to heaven, some of you are going to be disappointed that there's no scorecard. God's looking at one thing. Are you covered by the blood of Jesus Christ? That's what he's looking for. And when you get to heaven, I always get tickled when I hear these jokes. I start laughing before I hear the punchline, because the joke is these two people were standing out the gate to get into heaven, and they said to St. Peter, boy, are they going to be surprised when it's not like that at all. The truth of the matter is St. Peter's not going to meet you at the gate. Sorry. Some of you are going to be waiting a long time. I'm sorry, Jesus, I can't come in. I'm waiting for St. Peter. The joke said he'd meet me at the gate, Going to be like that at all, and so this idea is Jesus isn't keeping a scorecard, and when you meet him, he's not going to say, well, why do you have the right to come into heaven? and so you give them all the reasons why you have the right to get. Jesus is like Jesus doesn't know. The truth of the matter is God knows that if you're covered by the blood of Jesus Christ, you're in. You are in heaven. That's it. God has already decided. The choice has already been made. And so Jesus said, this is the work of God, that you believe in Him whom He has sent. Now, the word believe is the word pisteuo. Pisteuo. I can't even say it. Pisteuo. And it really means to be fully embraced and committed to something. When I believe something, I'm fully committed and I embrace it. This is mine. This is my lifestyle. This is what I focus on. I believe in this. I'm focused on this. I receive all that it is and I commit myself to it. That's what the word believe means. It doesn't mean like, well, I believe the sun's going to come up tomorrow. It's not that kind of belief. It's a belief that says, I totally embrace this and accept it and commit myself to it. That's what the word means. And so Jesus is saying that it's not about being committed to the work of God, it's about fully embracing and being committed to Christ. It's not just saying, okay, I'll follow God. Okay, I'll join this church because they have the best potlucks. And I kind of feel good when I go to the worship service. I really like their music and I really like their preacher. And you have all of these reasons. It's not about that. It's about embracing and being committed to God Himself. It's not a shallow faith that says, well, this has turned me on right now, so I think I'll follow this little whim. And this church is cool, but the minute this church starts doing something weird, I'm out of there. Or I'm going to do, if this church, if they make a stand on this political stand, I don't want to have anything to do with that. It's, what is your relationship with God Himself? Tell me about that. Tell me about your intimate relationship with God. And so it's about embracing and being committed to Christ and therefore simply responding to His calling and direction in your life. That is the kind of faith that God's looking for. It's not defined by works, the things that you do, but rather the condition of your heart, where you are with God, that commitment that says, God, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, but I'm just being faithful to do as you lead me, as I follow. The third characteristic of shallow faith is defining faith by others' experience. These are people, and there are a lot of people in churches today like this. You remember the movie Jerry Maguire? Look at what happens here in verses 30 through 32. Let's just read this again. So they said to him, what sign do you do that we may see and believe you? What work do you perform? Our fathers ate manna in the wilderness. As it's written, He gave them bread from heaven to eat. In other words, what are you doing? What can you do for us? Our ancestors had a right relationship with God, and He gave them manna from heaven. When I read this, I always think of that movie Jerry Maguire and Cuba Gooding Jr. went to. Remember the Show Me the Money rant? Show me the money! And he yells at Jerry, show me the money! And gets Jerry to yell, show me the money! Well, this is sort of what the people were doing here with Jesus, only it was, show me the manna! Show me the manna! They wanted that from Him. If you're God, then give us some manna. Do what God did with our ancestors. We want to be like them. We want to have a relationship with God like they had. Many of the people that were following Jesus drew this comparison between Jesus' miracle of feeding the several thousand people with 5 loaves and 2 fish and God providing manna in the wilderness for the Jews during the Exodus. They compared the two. And they called on Jesus to provide for them like God had provided for their ancestors. They wanted that kind of experience. They wanted that relationship with God. That's what we want. God, if you're God, then you do what you did for our ancestors. We want that kind of experience. This is a dangerous fault for many, many, many Christians. Living their faith on the basis of others' experience. And we do it in a couple of ways. Number one, by expecting or seeking the same experience that others have had. Well, they had this kind of righteous experience, so I really want that kind of experience too. Oh, I just want to be like so-and-so because, man, do they walk by faith. They really walk with God. I want that experience. Now, I'm not saying that we want to, we often compare our situation with other people's situation. But when it's seeking the other person's experience, this is what we're talking about here. Trying to have the experience that other people had. It's a dangerous, dangerous fault. The other way that we do it is we live our faith on the basis of others' experience. In other words, we're kind of looking in through the window, seeing what other people are going through, and we go, wow, isn't God good? And so we live our faith out vicariously. And so somehow or other, it stimulates our faith. You know, we look at what God's done in Jerry's life. So many of you enjoyed his testimony a couple of Sundays ago. And it stimulated your faith. But when you are on the outside looking in at what God is doing on his life, if that becomes your criteria, it's wrong. It's wrong. When you start living your faith stimulated by other people's experience, what kind of faith is that? What kind of a relationship is that? Now, we need to be encouraged and lift each other up. The Bible talks about that. Share your experiences, that you encourage one another. Yes, we do need to do that. That's the beauty of seeing what God's doing in other people's lives. That encourages us to know that God is up to something. But when we look at other people's lives and we live it vicariously because of what God's doing in other people's lives, even though we're not sensing it, even though it's not happening in our lives, something's wrong. That is what I'm talking about by defining faith by others' experience. And people in churches do this every day. It's like, yeah, I know God's not really working in my life, but look what he did in so-and-so's life. Isn't God good? But you're living your life vicariously because your relationship, that connection with God isn't really on fire for you, is it? Your faith isn't really stimulated by your relationship with God, only by someone else's relationship. What kind of faith is that? You might as well just go home. It's like being on the playground, but not playing on any of the rides because everybody else saying, wow, look at what a good time so-and-so's having on the seesaw. Isn't it great? It must be so much fun. This is great. Okay, I'm going home now. And never getting on the seesaw. That's what we're doing. So many people do that. They go to the playground, they see everybody else having fun, and they go, wow, isn't life good? And they go home. God says, I'm not looking for that in your life. Don't define your faith by others' experience. Romans says this, Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. In other words, let God transform your life. Let him renew your mind to have that connection with him. It's not about what other people are doing. It's about you. What is happening in your relationship with God. It's not about how great God is blessing other people and you just kind of enjoying it vicariously and going, wow, it makes me feel good to see that God's up to work. When you know in the back of your mind that your life is shallow. Your relationship is shallow. Well then, if that's the case, and those are three of the characteristics that are defined in this story. One, defining faith by an agenda, defining faith by works, and then defining faith by another's experience. If those are the definitions or the characteristics of a shallow faith.
On behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.